if you could move a narcissist, into the direction of the light triad, is something like loving kindness meditation something that I think heard you mention that before as something that might help?
Yeah. So if you break it down into where the problems are, and if the problem with narcissism is meanness or lack of compassion, you could think, well, what could I do as an intervention that would increase compassion? And one of those things would be like a loving kindness meditation. I mean, that's a technique, a different kind of techniques to get people to increase compassion through sort of daily practice or daily meditation. I know there's different, I know the Tibetans have, everyone's your mom, kind of these profound processes of expanding your capacity of self. And so I think there are techniques for that. But if your issue is something else, you could work on that other issue. So if the issue is more like I'm a nice person, but my ego's too big, you could work on that too. You could try to get like accurate feedback about everything you do and take notes, like, oh, I wasn't scoring that well, and get some accountability, in your life. So you figure out what the problem is, and you can kind of address that problem piece by piece instead of taking on the whole thing.
Right. And I think maybe to bring it full circle, this is kind of touching on what if someone feels like they have narcissistic kind of personality traits, what they might be able to do. Do you have any kind of thoughts on like how one should relate to the ego, like, as a tool for kind of navigating life?
Yeah, I mean, big picture, I'm interested because I don't, I struggle with it because narcissism I see as a real problem. But if you don't have an ego, and if you're not willing to take risks and you're not willing to try things, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's always this balance of like, do you use your ego? But how can you use your ego but not get attached to it? And so for me, I try to think, this is my metaphor. I think of like you use your ego like grabbing a dolphin, in the ocean. It kind of pulls you along and then you let it go when you need to. But that I always have terrible metaphors. I don't know that's why it sticks to me. But there's got to be a way that people are comfortable with ego, comfortable about it, so they're not fighting it, but also don't become captured by it, that they can say, look, I need my ego here, but it's just a thing. It's not real. I can put it down. I can let it go. I'm much happier without it, but I need it sometimes. And so that figuring out that trade-off, I think, is important. And if you don't have an ego, you're in trouble. But if you got too much of an ego, you're in trouble too. And anyway, I don't know, but I'm concerned that people will be like, I don't have any ego. How are you going to do anything if you're not ambitious enough to do anything? Am I making any sense?
Yeah. No, I think that's where I come down the other day is we're not going to go to one extreme or the other, right? We want a healthy balance of these things. They're there for a reason.
Yeah, and maybe this goes back to Buddhism again with the middle path. If you're too hung up on your ego, you're just going to end up just causing destruction. But if you don't have enough ego, you're not going to get off the ground. And maybe there's this balance that's really optimal. But the ego is so sneaky. That's the other thing. It's like, you're like, I'm done with my ego. I'm enlightened. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, I'm the best enlightened person. And so ego and spirituality, because it doesn't have really strict rules, is wide open for ego because who can call you on it? With science, you're like, your test is wrong. You're wrong.
Right.
With spirituality, like, no, it's crazy wisdom. You don't understand, but my wisdom of sleeping with everybody in my group is really super wisdom. And you're like, I can't argue with that. So there's this risk in these spiritual communities that they just pull for ego.
Right. Yeah, I think that crazy wisdom thing, if people haven't heard that, I think that's a term that came from Tibetan Buddhism, and it's been wildly misused to justify, kind of narcissists and psychopaths abusing people. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as there's compassion, like that's the thing that kind of can guide you and not see you far wrong. I personally wouldn't abide a teacher who was teaching me with crazy wisdom.
I don't either, but I started reading the story of Milarepa, the Tibetan saint. And I just been, for whatever reason, really, I just keep reading his little tales. And he's kind of an angry, mean shaman who just murdered a bunch of people. and then he struggled and became a great saint. And so I'm like, people are complicated. You can start but he had a pretty hard row, I think, with the, get rid of his karma. But anyway, I mean, people could come at this stuff in different ways. So I know there's a lot of ways to get there. What I'm worried about, whenever I see anyone who says they're a guru, immediately I'm nervous. And when they got people finding, I'm like, that's always warning signs. Now, I'm sure there are legitimate gurus out there. I'm always dubious of anyone who says they're a guru.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
why I
shouldn't
think
be, but that's
no, I agree. I think for me, the awareness around narcissism and the way it flourishes in hierarchies, even if that's just a one-tier hierarchy with a student and a guru, to me, this is, if we're going to move our culture forward, I think that would be one of the central pieces. Actually, I would want people having more awareness around and thinking more about whether we can kind of get things more decentralized instead of having these systems where people can really flourish and do harm in that way.
Yeah, it's dangerous.